Welcome to another episode of 5Fs to Love. Tonight's conversation is going to be about finances. Finances is often a tricky conversation for us to have with the person we're dating, our spouse, and it can sometimes stop a relationship dead in its tracks even before you get started. And sometimes it can stop a relationship that you've been in for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Again, finances can be a tricky conversation. So I want to welcome my co-host Reggie so we can get this evening started. We're hoping that tonight will offer you several different resources and opportunities to look at finances and how to have a conversation from various different perspectives. So Reggie, how are you? Are you excited about tonight's topic or what?
I'm excited and I'm nervous a little bit too because finances can step on anybody's toes.
That's true. I agree with that.
I just I got a bunion and a corn development, so I don't need my toes stepped on too hard.
I think it's going to be a real twister tonight. Well, I want to tell you, our guest tonight is an absolutely amazing and impressive person. I've known Matt now for I think maybe almost 2 years, and when I say to you, he gives a different perspective on relationships and marriage, and whether or not you're even ready to get married. He started a company called Bride Ready, and Bride Ready is a program that he runs, and it's really a consulting firm. But he runs it as a program where women go through different conversation phases, courses, in order to prepare them to be brides. And he feels that that's definitely what's needed in today's society in order to ensure that we continue to grow and develop in our relationships. But I want to say to you, one of the things that I truly love about him is that Matt has his own wine vineyard in Florida. And anybody who knows me knows that I drink a lot of wine on the show. So welcome, Matt Bowman. I am so excited, Matt, to have you on. And I see you're on the road. By the way, guys, Matt stays on the road. Outside of what he does with Bride Ready, Matt is constantly on the road. So Matt, how are you?
So I'm fantastic, Christine and Reggie. Glad to be here tonight. Looking forward to the conversation.
So nice. Matt, where are you at right now? Because I'm kind of curious. You stay on the road.
Sure. So, we're talking about finances tonight, and I'm actually in Atlanta, Georgia, for the grand opening kickoff of a Black-owned electric car company called Derek Bailey Automotive. So I was downstairs in the Derek Automotive, what they call Experience Center. And so you want to talk about Black dollars recirculating. Derek Bailey and the team in Atlanta is doing it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Matt, I'm going to tell you right now, I would love to have them on as a sponsor. I would just love, for
working
our
on it, show. Christine, working on it. When I go,
I know you are. I'm so
I've
excited.
already told them all about this podcast. They know about the 5Fs. I have some potential clients for Bride Ready. They're going to hear about Reggie, and Reggie's a live wire, so we're excited.
You know what? I think Matt, I may have to do a disclaimer for both Matt and Reggie tonight because Reggie, you're not going to be the only one. I'm going to have to do a disclaimer for both of you guys. Okay, so listen, I don't even want to hold up the conversation any further. So Matt, we normally go from segment to segment, but I think because of what we're talking about, I want us to stay very close to the conversation because I want to make sure we're offering people resources and opportunities on how to start the conversation. So the way we're going to start it with is the first question, which is there a difference in the impact that relationships, the impact the finance makes on relationships when it's a man versus a woman? Whether you're in a same-sex relationship or heterosexual relationship, when I say that to you, I'm talking about the perspective of head of household, right? So is there a difference in how we look at it? And I only asked that question, Matt, because you and I have talked, and I've talked to several of my other friends, and 90% of them are saying, I don't have an issue with dating a woman who's at the drive-through window at McDonald's as long as she has this, this, and this, because I have the money. It's not about the money. But I think women have a different perspective. But Matt, I want to get your perspective before I lean in. And then, of course, we know Nicole and the rest of the women are watching, so they're going to get their perspective. But let me have yours, Matt.
So when you talk about money, I take the conversation a little bit differently. I talk about roles. Like, what is the role of a man? Some women may decide that a man's role is priest, provider, and protector. So that provider role, which is very common for, especially for someone like me who's raised in the South, I look at that as, since I can provide for any woman, then the choice is mine. So however much money she makes is fine. It's a nice safety net. But at the end of the day, I look at that responsibility as mine. And a woman may have a biological clock, but a man has a financial clock. And if he cannot afford to take care of that woman, he is less likely to get married. And if he does get married, there might be some issues in that relationship unless he's very mature.
Me. Hey, you know what, Matt? I think that let me ask you a question. Do you think being from the South plays a huge part on how you feel about finances and the role that it plays in a relationship? Does it, I guess, not whether you're from the South, but where you're from?
Nope. Christine, it doesn't. You know, people might say that, you know, hey, he's a Southern gentleman, that plays a role. But if you look at the data and you look at, let's take African-American families in general. You know, before 1964, you know, African-American men were in the workplace really second only in number and position to white men. Marriage rates are real high. As the African-American male unemployment rate has risen, so has the inverse has happened. Less likely to get married. We're having babies. We're doing that. We're doing all the things necessary to have babies, but men are just not comfortable being married. And we're seeing it play out in colleges now. As a matter of fact, the latest data shows that there's more women in college than men, and the men who are not going to college and who also are not getting skilled trades, there's going to be a pandemic in this country, not just of COVID, but of men who are not willing to get married because they're not ready.
You know what? I'm going to say I agree. And Reggie, before I talk from the female perspective and what my concerns are, Reggie, what's your perspective? Is it the same as Matt's, or is it different, or is it similar?
It's very similar. It's very similar. I come from the other end of the spectrum than Matt. I am not the primary breadwinner in my household. My wife is. However, I don't have an issue with who I am as a man, with the income that I make a comfortable income that I can provide for me and my family. However, my income isn't jumping through hoops. And, you know, I was an educator for a while. I just stopped that not long ago. However, I would be lying if I didn't tell you that there were some disagreements and issues in our household because of my lack of income. Now, putting that all in perspective, I don't feel less than because of my income. I don't, and I never did. However, you do have to be in a position as a man to be able to afford yourself and your family at the bare necessities. No one wants to be at the bare necessities, but at the bare necessities, that's what you need to be able to do. And I remember when there was times and lulls in employment that my manhood did take a beating. It did take a beating internally, whether I voice it or not. Is something else, but internally, I must say that I was sitting here like, man, you know, what's going on?
You know, and Reggie, I really appreciate you sharing that with us, because I think a lot of times that perspective, when you have, and by the way, if you haven't watched before, Reggie's wife is a doctor. So when you marry someone who's a doctor, you know, that's really like you're coming in behind anyway as far as salary, unless you're making $500,000 a year, right? Walking through the door. I mean, so that's just a given. So Reggie, I applaud you, because I think a lot of times when men meet women who are in a different tax bracket, they do take on a different perspective, and it's not always positive. I can only speak from my personal experience that people make a lot of assumptions about me as a person and whether or not they measure up. Because for me, it's not about that. It's not, as long as you have a job and you can manage what you do financially, I'm okay with you, right? I'm not going to crush it. But what I will say is, it's definitely hard when no one has any finances, right? Or one person's carrying the load and no one's bringing it in. So Wallace, thanks for joining us tonight. He responded with, this is why we teach boys and young men about their responsibilities as a single man and what when you get married. So the thing is, I agree with you. I think we do need to share more of this with young men prior to getting married, so they understand the importance of it. So, Matt, from your perspective, should women begin to look at finances from a different lens? Because we look at finance as a security blanket. Honestly, whether you're successful or not, it's a status thing, it's a security blanket, it's a couple different things for us, and we may look at men a little bit different because of that. Terrence says the maturity of both the man and the woman is vital, and I am glad Matt mentioned that.
Well, Christine, everyone always puts the focus on the men, and while I have Bride Ready, I'm also unapologetic in my support of men and the challenges we face. Everybody, male or female, is gonna lose a job. So I don't care whether you're in the military and you got this stable job. At the end of the career, most veterans stumble as they leave the military, and their check goes from 100% of that check to a retired check, which really means you're working at 33%. And people have mental illness, PTSD, and inability to cope. If you're a high earning doctor, go ahead and have 1 or 2 babies. My wife, when we first got married, was a pharmacist. And she used to wave the dollar bills and all this kind of stuff. And I'm a lowly ensign at the time. So she's literally making 3 times as much as I was making. And I almost left the Navy to follow her career. But a wise mentor said, Matt, don't worry. Watch the clock. Watch the clock. And within 5 years, I had caught her and passed her just because it's a partnership. So you got to know as a man, it really as a partner, that there will be times when your partner will stumble in life, and then you got to take up the slack. So that conversation about provider, who is the provider in this relationship, will shift at some point from one person carrying most of the weight to the other. And if you're not ready for that, you're not ready for a relationship.
That's very well spoken, very well said. And one of the things I can say about that is, and you're absolutely right, there's certain things that are around the corner in any and everybody's lives that we don't know about. I was a completely healthy man, had a stroke, in the hospital for a week, and then was messed up, laid up for several months. You don't forecast that. And at some point in time, if you guys aren't solid, that can be a huge burden on a relationship. Not only with the income not coming in like it was, but now you're having medical expenses and you are completely needy of someone caring for you. Yeah, Matt, very well said.
The other flip side of it is, what happens if one person has way more money? Everyone always talks about, what happens if you're in an unbalanced relationship. If one person is, really carrying the load and the other person has little to no income, that imbalance can really affect the relationship. And so people, the one who is, especially if they're, high 6 figures, 7 figures person,
Yeah.
They really got to be careful. There's a lot of temptation out here. There's a lot of, side chicks and pool boys and all kind of things that are out there waiting if you have extra time, extra money, and extra opportunity. So there is a risk in finances that spill over into other areas. And so sometimes people in their relationship, and they say it's the finance, but it's really the things that come with extra finances and extra time from a man or a woman.
And I agree with that. And that kind of lends to our next question. Question number 2. And again, we have like 12 questions to get through finance, but our question number 2, I think, is going to provoke a lot of, not pushback, but conversations. So when you think about, as you progress through relationships, and you want to talk about who's responsible when you're dating, a lot of times dating and date night, a lot of times people think is the expense of the man, right? And then how do you begin to have that conversation on who's responsible for that? And this is when you're married or dating. Because still, when you have date night, women tend to think, even when you're married, my husband's going to take care of this night for me, right? So, Matt, what do you think about that?
So, I'm going to go with, it's the man's responsibility to take you out as a woman on a date. Now, he looks at his budget and he takes you where his budget can afford to go. Now, if you decide that you have, champagne taste and caviar taste and he's got a beer budget, well, then y'all are probably not a good fit. So to me, I think that there is a benefit for men to pursue the woman that they're with. Even if the woman initiates the conversation, it's very important for that relationship to build, for the man to invest. At the end of the day, the numbers, there's a lot of available women out here. There's a lot of available men, but my specialty is women 32 and up. And for the 32 and up, if he wants to take you someplace, you go. And you decide whether that's the man you want to be with based on his budget and how he spends his money. The last thing I'll say is, just because you're a six-figure man doesn't mean you're going to take a woman out for caviar and champagne. You could be a six-figure man and take a woman out to McDonald's. And the man who's a janitor, or the man who's a blue-collar man who makes $30,000 to $50,000, he's willing to put his money where his mouth is, and he'll take you to a five-star restaurant. So it really depends on the relationship.
I like what you're saying. I think, and I agree with you 100%. I think when it's dating, I think of courtship, right? And prospectively, at my age of 50, I'm hoping that a person is dating me because they're interested in marrying me, not just for something to do, right? So in that sense, I'm thinking if you're courting me, then you would pay for the dates. But I also think a woman in my position that occasionally I would want to plan a date, or even offer, well, hey, if you're paying for it, can I leave a tip? Or can we go somewhere else for dessert? I would like to do something for you. So I think that's a conversation to have. But I think oftentimes women just sit there when the bill comes and they don't communicate. Like, okay, are we splitting this, or what would you like to do? And I think, Matt, when we went out, that was a quick question I said to you. I said, well, wait a minute, let me pay for something. And you said, no, you will not. I asked you out. And I was just like, okay, I thought that was beautiful. But I was just like, I want to help pay for some of this, right?
The dynamics of dating is very different now, with women being equal earners, and as Matt had stated earlier, even greater earners than men. So as a man, when you start to hear women, I'm educated, independent, single, this, that, and the other, and I got my own, and I got this. So all this strength is applied up until the bill comes. and at some point in the dating relationship, and this wasn't the case when I was dating, you're looking at this situation and been like, why aren't you strong when it comes to paying this bill? Why aren't you strong when it comes to reaching that hand out and offer? Here's what I believe in the dating scene right now. Because we are both coming in more equal than we've ever been in society as professionals, as income earners, we need to get to a place where maybe 2-3 dates in, hey, listen, can we schedule? Are we going to date every weekend or every other weekend? What's our dating regimen going to be? Are we going to go out on the town one week and do Netflix the next week? So let's start picking weekends. Not only are you establishing, as Matt said, I invited you out, this is my bill. We're establishing who has the bill that night, so there's no awkwardness at the date. And also, you're building a relationship because you're planning for the future of being together. Instead of on Thursday night, you get a call for a date on Friday. Nobody wants that. Because
Reggie, I look at it as like a 5-course meal, right? I may pay for the first course, which is dinner. But if the woman wants to go to the second course, which is a movie, especially a movie that I don't want to see, I would be perfectly okay with her paying for the second course for the movie, because that is going to be a reflection of how our relationship is going to be. She may decide, hey, I want to go to the mountains. I don't ski. I don't want to go. So guess what? If you work and you make that money then you can pay for that vacation for our, basically it's for you. I'm just going along. And likewise, if I want to get box seats, at a Cowboys game, or maybe she wants to get the box seats at the Cowboys game because she's a football fan and I'm not, then if she wants to pay for that experience, then I'm going along. I just think it reflects the relationship that, listen, there's a give and take. I want you to go to dinner because I enjoy seeing you eat, so I'll pay.
Right.
You want me to go to the Cowboys game. I don't want to watch the Cowboys game, so you got to pay. So I think there's a give and take. So I look at it, Reggie, like a 5-course meal. And there's always dessert at the end. Always dessert at the end, Reggie. Always dessert.
And you know
Matt, your smile just says a lot. I hope your wife is watching. Okay? I hope Crystal's watching. So I want to say to you guys, there's so many women, and I have a lot of girlfriends who think the total opposite. They think while you're dating that the man should wine and dine them and supply the resources for these dating experiences. So if they say, hey, I want to go to the Beyonce concert, they're thinking you should get the ticket, create a whole evening out of it, and they should show up looking absolutely fabulous. What do you guys think about that? Matt?
So I think it's the art of seduction. If you seduce a man, you seduce your partner to pay, that's one thing. I can tell you this, what really turns a man off? What really turns me off is when you go to dinner, the person orders all this food, $100, $200 worth of food, and then they slide the bill to you. And then I blink and I go, I was actually going to pay for it until you slid it, until you forced it on me. So it's okay if a woman thinks a man should pay. But then the requirement means she needs to be skillful enough and seductive enough to make me want to pay. But don't go in there with demands and being rude, in my opinion, rude about my paying the bill, because I had a budget in mind and you might have exceeded my budget.
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, that's probably why I don't get meals paid for often. I'm not that skillful and not that seductive. So maybe that's something I need to work on, because I'm the only person who will pull the bill towards me. So, and that has nothing to do with money. I just don't think I'm that seductive or skillful. So like,
but so we talk about giving people skills. The best skill that you can have is silence. Don't do nothing. Don't touch the bill. Don't slide it. Just keep ordering drink after drink, or water and lemon if you have to. And then you wait for the other person to reach. The first one who reaches for the bill loses.
It's true.
I think that's funny. So Michael Belcher, Michael, thank you for watching. Does it make the woman feel less of a woman if she has to pay? Why? Same question for a man. And does it make him feel less?
I don't believe so. I believe that we're in a different culture than our parents were. Our parents were in a culture where the men made 2, 3, 4, 5 times what a woman made. And it was almost shameful for a man to ask a woman to take what little bit she had and entertain him with it. We're not in that culture anymore. And so therefore, when a man pays, or when a woman has an expectancy for a man to pay, then you start creating an expectancy for what I believe I should get when I pay. And then we don't want to walk in those shoes anymore. Wait a minute. No. You have an expectancy of an archaic system, but you don't want to live in the June Cleaver society today. You want to be June Cleaver for yesterday, but you don't want to act June Cleaver's role today. So is it, does a woman, should she feel bad? No. What you're coming in here as is equal partners in the progression of this relationship. And like, one thing I absolutely agree with Matt is, if there's something that you want to do, then you go ahead and foot that bill and let me get that experience. So now I'm taking data. She likes skiing. You know what? I'm not a skier, but I'm gonna find out what kind of skis she like. What chalet is good. You know what I mean? Because now it's on me to present back to you the things you like, and present it to you with love, and vice versa. Should a man feel bad if he has to pay? No. I think it's only a bad thing if there's no equality or equity in it when it's all one-sided.
Okay. I like that
Reggie
perspective,
said something,
Reggie.
Christine, that I want to address, and this is what comes up in Bride Ready.
Mm-hmm.
An archaic system.
Mm.
It's an archaic system. And so what I teach in Bride Ready is how do you navigate an archaic system in a 21st century world? And one of the premises is you're either hot or you're cold. You're either playing in an archaic system or you're not. If
Exactly.
you decide you're not, then basically you're rewriting rules for your relationship that might not be necessarily traditional rules. What I teach you in Bride Ready is, all right, in the archaic system, some man at the end of a relationship is going to ask you to marry him. That's the archaic system that Reggie referring to. What I teach in Bride Ready is how does a woman navigate the relationship from beginning to end to get to that goal. Now, if a woman says, man, I don't want no man to ask me to marry him, great, then you're not designed for Bride Ready. Bride Ready is for the women who go, I'm going to play in this archaic system that Reggie talked about, and there are certain expectations, the only one of which is a hard, fast expectation, which is at the end of this period of relationship, you are going to pull out a ring and ask me to marry you. That's what I specialize in. But from zero to that moment, there's lots of ways to do it. Some archaic, some more modern, but that's a good discussion. But I lean, Reggie, more towards the archaic rules and trying to teach women, listen, stick to the rules that got your grandma in the house. Those rules still work.
Okay, so let me just, Matt, before you go, Reggie, let me just say, one of our viewers, Denise, thank you so much for the comments. I would like to ask en route, hey, may I treat you for tonight's dinner so there is no issue at the end of the dinner? Denise, I think that's a great way to introduce the conversation. And I will say to you that I've actually asked out quite a few guys on dates, and I've paid for them. And at the end of the night, I always do the funny thing, and I always end it this way. I always go, dude, are you putting out or what? Because that was like a $250 bill. Like, what's happening? Like, and I want them to laugh because I want them to understand sometimes that's how women feel, right? Like the end of the night, because you paid like $250 for this night out, what are you expecting? So let me go to Terrence. And Terrence, thank you so much for viewing. The communication has to be transparent, especially when it comes to finances. When dating, we must stop sending a representative. So we're going to get into that. And we have a few more questions, and we're going to and thank you so much for Terrence. But before we continue, we have to go to our sponsors, and we will be right back.
Día que me falte tu piel, ¿qué será? ¿Qué será de mí? No seas parte de mi amanecer. Día que me falte tu piel, ¿qué será? ¿Qué será de mí? No seas parte de mi amanecer.
Okay, welcome back to the 5 F's to Love. If you're just joining us, right now we're having a conversation about finance. And I know sometimes we have these questions in relationships, and it may not end so well while you're having a conversation, and it may not end the way you anticipate, with someone kind of looking at you in a different perspective. We left off with one of our viewers, Terrence, saying this is a real conversation and you should stop sending your representative. So our question number 3 is, when do you think a person should discuss how much money they make a year when dating? And I say that because when you're dating, is it a month in? Is it 2 months in? Is it 3 months in? Because there are a few more questions that's going to follow after this is the reason why we're asking this question. And so, Matt, what do you think when you're dating someone, when is the best time to discuss finances, like how much money you make a year?
Yeah. So I don't look at it as a time date stamp. what I look at it as the progression of the relationship. So let's say if if a relationship has 5 steps, where one is establishing rapport and understanding a person's background being step 2, it's understanding a person's background in step 2, where you start to begin the discussion of how much do you make. So for example, in my case, when she told me she was going to be a pharmacist, I actually thought a pharmacist made $18,000 a year. I actually thought, I said, who would want to sit behind a counter and give pills to old people? I said, how much they pay you? About $10,000, $18,000? I had no idea the income level and what that number meant. But during phase 2 is the getting to know a person. And let me just say this one final thing about that part, about how much a person makes. When you're dating somebody, there are, when people talk, we talk about, verbal and nonverbal cues.
Mm-hmm.
How much you make, there's a lot of nonverbal cues that get put off, that people ignore on how much you make. Because the real question isn't how much you make, but how much of what you make are you willing to spend on me? So I think you need to take a look at both those things as you're looking at relationships.
I love that. That's the perfect question. And earlier today, I was talking with someone, and they said, when women marry athletes or a person of high stature, they go into it knowing that they're going to be financially taken care of, right? And the perspective is, or the perception is, at that point, whenever you go out and you spend money, that's the question. How much of your money is basically allotted for me? And those are conversations, but it's so unfortunate because when people watch those reality shows, you're dating a guy who's an engineer at General Motors, Chrysler, or Ford. He's not an athlete. He's a regular person who goes to work every day, and you want to live like a reality star, like you see on TV. That's not reality, right? But you're expecting that lifestyle. So the thing is that maybe his finance can't afford you. And the other question I put out there is, we have women who think that men should pay their bills because they say, you make so much more money than I do. So why aren't you helping me out with my bills? We've been together 2 or 3 months now. Can you pick up the rent? Can you pick up a utility or cable bill? So, Reggie, what do you say to that? I already know what Matt's going to say, which is cracking me up. What do you think, Reggie?
My next question would be, are you a whore?
Right.
I'm sorry. Anything that Reggie says and does, the finance director have to be responsible for it legally. Okay, go ahead, Reggie. You said, are you a whore? Did you just say that?
Because if I got to pay for it, because what you're telling me is that in order to be in this relationship with you, starting off, I have to finance it. I remember dating a girl years ago, and she said, she said, you want to take me to the mall? I was like, sure, let's go. And we was getting there, and she was grabbing stuff, and I was like, man, she about to shop. And we got to the counter, and she was like, looking at me. And I looked back at her like, oh, you expect me to pay for this? She's like, yeah, you said you would take me to the mall. I said, well, sweetheart, we not doing that. And she was like, you don't get your girl's hair done? I said, who? I said, your hair was looking good when I met you. Who paid for it then? That's who should be paying for it now. You was well dressed when I met you. That same person should be paying for your clothes now. We're not in an established relationship. And if you decide that you want me to start paying for it, do you know how much leg you have to give up to be?
Wait a minute, Reggie, before you go any further, Denise is making me laugh. Thank you, Denise, for joining us. She says, if you did not create it, you do not pay for it. I love it. I will say this to you. I think oftentimes that is a conversation that women have because they're with someone who is in a higher tax bracket. And their assumption is, when are you going to start taking care of me? So, Matt, what's your perspective on it?
Yeah. So, again, it goes back to what phase in the relationship you're in. The women who think you're going to pay their rent early on don't understand what phase of the relationship you're in. Short of you being engaged or married, there's no reason for another person, grown person, to pay a person's rent. As a matter of fact, if you come to me and say, can you pay my rent? It's actually I'm going to first think what Reggie thought. Then the next thing I'm going to say is, you know what? You that irresponsible. You can't pay your rent. You ain't got no mama or daddy to pay your rent. It is not, it's over. The relationship would actually be over because I would be insulted by either you think I'm stupid or else you're a prostitute. And the third thing is you're irresponsible. So I don't know which one of the three, but it doesn't really matter. This relationship is coming to a fast end. So, you know, your job as a person in a relationship is to put your best foot forward and show yourself to be as responsible as possible if you want a partner. Now, if you're just looking for a sucker and you're looking for somebody to buy you things, that's also a very dangerous game to play because let's say I buy it. I guarantee you I want a return on my investment. So when I take you back to that house, you are going to give me the value of that rent or the value of those clothes, and you're not going to want to do that. It's not worth it.
Wow.
And believe me, the street value is only $40. So you can do the math on how many times you got to do it to get my money's back.
And what Matt is saying is, in order for me to have to pay for it, do you know how much better you have to be and more available you have to be than what I got for free?
So let me ask you guys a question. What do you think about when men date women who are financially secure, higher tax bracket, and they have an expectation? I know a lot of men who, to be honest with you, their girlfriends pay their bills. They take them shopping. They take them on vacations. They pay their child support. So what do you think about men in the reverse role who do that to women who make pretty good income? What do you think about that?
No.
I'm sorry. Do I hear crickets?
No.
Do I hear crickets? What's happening?
It's no double standard. If you can't take care of yourself, you don't need to be in a relationship. If you know, at the end of the day, I used to teach math in middle school, and I would tell kids, I said, I'm gonna give you a simple math equation that's gonna carry you for the rest of your life in relationships. You have one, they have one. Together, you have two. The problem is, you have one, they have nothing, and together you have one. It only made one person better. It did not make the other person better. And that's always going to be a problem in a relationship. And when you come in needy from the jump, somebody will do it early on because they feel a sense of caring for you, but then you are going to tap them out.
So you think eventually at some point, whether it's a man or woman, the person who they feel they should be responsible for their lifestyle will get exhausted from it, right?
They may not, but they'll be exhausted.
Okay, so let me ask you.
It's absolutely guaranteed they'll get exhausted.
Do you think that's what happens when you have these high power men, athletes, movie stars who have spouses who are not as successful as they are? Do you think at some point they get exhausted from the relationship and they say, well, you know what? I'd rather just depart. But then they end up being with someone else that they're financially taking care of them. What do you think that's about? Because finance plays they're dating these athletes or whomever, and we see that a lot of time on reality TV, like the doctor show, right? Which kind of surprised me, where a lot of the female doctors who were the breadwinners, their husbands were there, but they were not as successful, and they end up getting divorced.
Yeah, whenever you're in an unbalanced relationship, there's a lot of things that you got to work out. To the question of minimums. Let's talk about minimums, right? What are minimums? Food, shelter, clothing. Those are basic human needs minimum. So if you can cover that, if each person can cover their own minimums, and that's what Reggie was talking about with the 1 + 1 = 2, then you have the foundation for a relationship. Doesn't matter whether you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,400 square foot house, or whether you have an 8,000 square foot mansion. As long as both of you can cover the minimums to keep a roof over your head, you can have a relationship. I think where you get into trouble, and this is really, I think, for a different show is finances and family. There are other people who get into your relationship and try to dictate how your finances should be, how you should be living, how you should be treated. But at the end of the day, if you got a roof over your head, 3 squares a day, and you have a car to get you back and forth to work, you have the minimums for a relationship. It's not until other people, well-meaning people who love you, who say, you know what, you don't need an Uber, you need a Bentley. No, you don't. You need to get to work on time. You don't need a Bentley because you ain't got Bentley money. But even if you do, your partner may not have Bentley money, and now you're putting an unreasonable demand on that person.
Okay, so before we go any further, Denise said, exit stage right. You have proven you are not ready for a mature relationship. You are responsible for you, period. And I like that comment. So I'm going to ask the question again. I know a lot of people who their first introduction to you is about what they do for a living, and they're automatically telling you what they make. When they say, oh, I'm an attorney at this firm, or I'm an engineer. So what I'm saying to you is they make the introduction. And so what do you feel about people who introduce themselves to you by their title or what they do? Do you think they're letting you know that I have the finance to do this, or what do you think they're saying?
You know, I don't read any more into what people say than what they say. They're just telling you what they do and how much they make by inference. I mean, look, that's just their talk game, right? Everybody got a different approach to how they approach people. I don't make a judgment on how they approach you and what they say. I just put that as a data point. And in Bride Ready, what we teach you is to take all the data points to build a picture of, do you want to be with this man in that situation? Because the very next question he's going to ask you is, what do you do? And
okay, and you know what, Matt? I'm going to answer that question for you because I've been dating for quite some time. We're out there dating. And over the years, when I've told people I was an IT person, when I've told people I was a chief information officer or CEO, it was a little different when I said I had a window washing company. When I said, oh, I have a window washing company, the guys would get relaxed. They would talk to me. I would get drinks, you know, boop, boop, be-doo. But the minute I said, oh, I have an IT consulting firm, or I'm the CIO at this company, the conversation shifted. So I'm going to say to you, it's really hard sometimes. And I think from a male's perspective, you guys think it's not that big of a deal. I wasn't introducing what I made a year. They just asked me, what do I do? And immediately I didn't get that drink. But before you answer that question, Matt, Anissa, thank you so much for joining us. She said, grown people should be self-sufficient. Even if one has more, he or she should not be expected to upgrade the other. And I like that. But I think I got dumped on, Matt, because when I had that window washing company, I was like the cutie pie. The minute I was CIO, honey, they were like, I'm done with you.
But Christine, archaic rules. It may not be right. It may not reflect 2021, but these are archaic rules. So for a woman who owns an IT company or who's the CEO of a company, you need to wait. My recommendation, you need to wait to tell people what you do until they get to know you. Look, it's no different.
But what do I say, Matt? They asked me, what do you do for a living?
Man. If I'm a R&B, if I'm a reggaeton singer and I got 1 million fans and I come to America and you don't know who I am, if I tell you, hey, I'm a best-selling Billboard reggaeton singer, you're going to treat me different than if you just meet me and I go, hey, my name is Mateo. You go, oh, that's just Matt. I will get a different response. So it doesn't just work for women. Quite frankly, it works for everyone. You will get a response based on what you say you do.
You're
the only
correct.
thing that you're
but
saying
Matt,
is,
that's
when I
not
say I'm
the
a
question.
CEO, I get a worse response than if I
do. So what do I do? When a guy says, well, what do you do for a living? What should I say to him?
Oh, there's lots of humor. Humor is your
entrepreneur.
Reggie, tell her, Reggie.
I'm a struggling entrepreneur trying to get my business up. And then they'll say, oh, well, what do you do? I would really not like
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. I think it's so sad I have to downplay who I am. But you can walk around and pop your collar and be a CEO, but I can't.
Christine, I'm saying to you is, just because I ask you a question you don't have to answer it. So you could downplay it. That's one way. But just because I asked you a question, you don't have to answer it. You could tell me, hey, listen, Matt, you know what? I want to get to know you. Let's not talk about work right now. Let's talk about each other.
Absolutely.
I like that response, Matt.
And one of the things that people are so up in arms about is that what you do and what you make at the very introduction of a relationship is very personal. It's almost coming to me like, hey, do you like it?
Okay. I like that. That's so true. But I think sometimes people do that.
Are you more preferable to oral or vaginal? You know what I mean? Like, well, what are you talking about? No, we don't have those conversations in the first meet. So why would I do that? Hey, you know what? I'm real freaky. How about you? No, we don't do that. So why is that an issue right now? I have a problem if somebody comes to me and say, hey, I'm Reggie Dillard and I play in the NBA. What that probably would tell me first off is that you don't want me to see your character. You want me to see your representative. You want me to make an assessment of who you are by what you do. And there's some jerks in the NBA. There's some jerks who are IT professionals. There's some jerks who are the president, the former president of the United States. As much money as they have, money does not buy character. And
but Reggie, that's
high income and low character. And
exactly. But that's what Terrence was saying. Terrence was saying, you're meeting people's representatives. So when we look at this question, our next question, which is question number 4, remember that whole comment that men used to say, I paid the cost to be the boss, right? So What does that term mean now when you have a lot of women who are the breadwinners in relationships? Does that still stand, or has that meaning changed? Do they pay the cost to be the boss?
It all depends on what you mean by be the boss.
Well, I mean, what did it mean before? To me, it was indicative of, I make decisions for this household. I'm the ruler of the roost. That's what. So when I used to hear that comment being stirred around with men, and that's women would ask a question. They say, you know what? I pay the cost to be the boss around here.
Well, first of all, no matter.
So what does that mean? So I'm asking you, what does that mean?
Hold on. No matter who uses that statement, it is a controlling statement, and what they're telling you is you're signing up for my dominance, and this is a particular way in which I'm going to dominate you. And I don't care how much you make, you don't have the right to dominate me. You know what I mean? There's going to be aspects in a marriage, in a household, where there's going to be leadership from one person, and leadership that is going to be shared, and leadership that is going to be, distributed. Now, within doing all of that, anytime that someone says, well, I make the most money, so it's going to be done this way, that for me, that's a red flag. And I want to be like, well, why do you feel like you want to use one of your characteristics about who you are as a person to dominate me? And I don't subject myself, nor would I put anybody else in a situation where they're going to be dominated.
But so the question still remains, Reggie, is not about that. It's about, that's what men used in that terminology. I paid the cost to be the boss. So what does that mean to you, Matt? And does that shift when it's a woman?
Yeah. So just because it was an expression doesn't mean that it was a right expression. I paid the cost to be the boss. Bride Ready focuses on quote unquote boss women, women who make 6 figures and some who make 7 figures. And what we do in our year-long coaching program is share with them strategies to have a relationship when you're with a partner who either makes more money than you or less money than you. The amount of money really doesn't matter. It's all about relationships. So you can be a boss at work, but you cannot take that same attitude into your household. When you go into your household, you have to go as a partner. Now, there is an exception. There are some men who, quite frankly, don't mind you coming in as a boss. And if that's what you're looking for, as long as you're clear and intentional about the fact that you plan on keeping your boss hat on all the time, then we will find you a man who is accepting of that approach. Some men are perfectly fine with you being the boss and you bringing that boss spirit home. And that can be a great marriage, a great relationship. But you have to decide, though, you can't have a double standard. You can't say,
I agree.
You can't say I want my alpha male king and then have him let you be the boss at the same time. I can't have it both ways.
Right. I agree. 100%, Matt. I agree 100%. Okay, so question number 5.
And I don't know if you heard all that, but
no, Matt, we got it all, and I agree with you 100%. I see a lot of times when women are at a certain level and they are the primary person bringing in the funds, it's a different conversation, and sometimes they don't know how to switch it off. And I agree with you. I run into quite a few, and I'm with my fellow breadwinners. I get that part, right? And what it is that we do, but it can cause some confusion. So Terrence Johnson says, and thanks, Terrence, for joining us. This statement is another example, the archaic relationship system. And I agree with you 100%, Terrence. Even now, you still have some people who have that conversation. So our next question the more questions we go through is going to do a deeper dive. And I'm going to say to you, Terrence, I agree with you 100%. I think a lot of times we are still trying to accommodate the relationships or lifestyles that our parents had, and that we're not taking into account that there's been some shifts. Denise says, let's discuss what is the best direction or best decision to make for us, and how we move forward from there. I only boss the dog around in the house, not my spouse. I honor him. His input is wanted and needed and respected. And that's how a household should run. I don't think there should be a boss. But unfortunately, do you know there's still men and women still running around the house saying, I pay the cost to be the boss. So our next question is, do you decide what percentage of each person's income goes into the household budget? So when you look at your household budget, you may have a household budget, you may have a savings account, an IRA, a 401k, a vacation account, a Christmas account, a college fund. So when both people are working, how do you have that conversation, whether you're married or living together? Some people are lifelong partners, right? In situations with same-sex relationships, in some states are not allowed to get married, so it's still the same situation. You want to talk about what are we contributing to this household budget? So Matt, how do you start out that conversation?
So Christine, the good news and the bad news is most people don't have a budget. So that's a moot point. Most couples and most households are not operating off of a budget and no semblance of a plan. So kudos to whoever out there has a family budget that includes, the two, husband and wife roles and the children. But let's say that you do have a budget.
Matt, but before you do that, let's go back to what you said, because you're right. A lot of people don't have budgets, but how do they have that conversation about who's paying what and how much money goes into this or that?
So relationships are complicated. You can have the same person have a different financial discussion with every single person they're with. So that is a very independent thing. It's customized, depends on who you're with. You just sit down and you have the conversation. There's a lot of conversations and actions in relationships that are not necessarily fun. I think the money conversation should be done at a time when there's low stress, when the money has just arrived. Don't wait till the middle of the month if you know you paid on the 1st to have a budget conversation. Have the budget conversation when you just got paid and he just got paid. Everyone's in a good mood. There's lots of money, at least on paper. Then have the conversation. So it's not about should you have the budget conversation. To me, it's more about when you have the budget conversation, and have it when the coffers are full and not when the coffers are empty.
I like that. Reggie, what's your perspective?
I agree with Matt. The only thing that I would say is before you sit down with money topics, pray. And I know that sounds funny, but y'all need to be on the same accord. You need to take your flesh out of it and really put it in writing what we're trying to accomplish with sitting down right now, so feelings won't get in, take over, and put everything out of whack. it's not a very easy topic for people to have, whether you're making a lot of money or you're not, because it shows a level of vulnerability that people just aren't used to being. They're not used to being vulnerable like that. In other words, I'm exposed. I'm exposed 100%. So, like Matt said, have the budget conversation when the money is at full tilt, and just figure out where it goes and have conversations about where it should go and how it should go. For instance, in my household, my wife gets her hair done. I don't have a hair expense because I cut my own hair. So when we start divvying out personal money, I don't need that
Right.
budget to get my hair done. She does. And it's not okay, well, I don't spend this much money a month getting my hair done, so you shouldn't spend that. No, you talk about it. You figure out what's needed for you, what do I need, and then you come in the middle and say, okay, we can't afford all of what we want to do.
Right.
But let's tier it. What are your top 1, 2, or 3?
So my question, Reggie, I'm asking you is, how do you decide to have that conversation? Not what you do, but how do you decide? Like, how do you intro that conversation? That's what I'm asking you and Matt. Like, how do you do that? Because to Matt's point, I happen to grow up in a household where we did have budgets, right? So I grew up where my dad had a binder, like these, books, and he wrote down every month how the bills were paid, and my mom went through and paid bills accordingly. So my question to you guys is this: what is the first thing you would say to your partner?
We need to sit down and talk about the budget, and here's the time when the money is going to be in the account. What time is good for you on Thursday? Is it 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock?
Okay, but my question, Reggie, is what if you get pushback? Like one of our guests said that she did not discuss budget with her spouse, nor her money or her finances, for at least 3 to 6 months of the relationship. And they're now married, and she's still uneasy about it. So Matt, I'm asking you, like, how do couples come together and say, hey, we need to sit down and discuss, we need to put together a budget. We've been living this way, but we got to change if we want to save money, if we want to have 401k and IRA. Like, how do you have that conversation when you haven't been having that conversation?
Yeah. So the budget conversation, the money conversation is the very next conversation you have after you have the monogamous conversation. Up until the monogamous conversation,
thank you.
You don't need to know what's in my pocket. But once we have the monogamous conversation, i.e., I'm going to be with you and you're going to be with me, we both nod our heads in agreement that it's just you and I. Then there needs to be what I call the ABCs. What is the annual income right now, not projected, not after your windshield wiping business takes off, Christine, or whatever it is that you do. What is your annual income right now? I need to know because I plan on being with you. Let's do a budget. And then in addition to the budget, the other question is credit. And before you have an ABC conversation, you need to be sober. So you lead it.
Okay, Matt, don't, Matt, you're going into one of our questions. Don't give away our question.
I would take it a step further and say,
Matt went all the way to credit.
So when a person admits to you they got a 490 credit score or 510 credit score, that's not the time to bust out laughing, because people are now opening themselves up in this ABC conversation to be very vulnerable. A man may or a woman may only make $8,000 a year. That's not the time to snicker and laugh.
So
they
guys,
never done a budget.
So
they
Matt,
may have a hair budget or a budget
Matt,
that's exceedingly high. So the ABCs are a sober conversation, and there are moments when you're kind of euphoric, i.e., I asked you to be with me, you agreed, you asked me to be with you, I agreed. Now let's add this sober conversation, because the oxytocin is going to make it pleasant because I like you, right? No matter what you say, you can tell me your credit's, listen, your credit's 500. And if I'm high on oxytocin, I'm going to go, okay, I'm okay, whatever. Listen, we
so wait,
credit.
Matt, this is not about credit score. My question is, regardless whether you're dating or you're married, I know married couples right now who do not share finances. So I'm asking you all the same question. If you guys can't answer this, I'm concerned. How do you introduce? Because to Michael Belcher's question, it's not a romantic topic if you're not all in. So let's sit down and discuss the budget. And that's the thing. So how do you,
I'm telling you, as soon as you have that discussion that you're in a monogamous relationship, the next conversation has to be about budget.
To what I'm saying.
It does.
I know people who've been married 20 years and still don't have shared expenses. Again, this is not just dating.
But just because they didn't have the conversation, okay, you know, there's an assumption that says that we have to agree on budget. We don't have to agree on budget. We do not. We just have to have a conversation of what are the ground rules for our relationship. And
there you go.
No, a budget is not a prerequisite for a successful relationship. It is not. I may decide that my money is my money, your money is your money, and that's it. And we're going to stay married for the next 60 years. Other couples may decide to combine their money, but a budget is not a prerequisite for a relationship.
It's not a prerequisite, but do you agree that one of the top 3 reasons in finance is normally number 1 is finance? And I think, and to your point, Matt, and I agree with you 100%. When you agree to be in a monogamous relationship, at that point, you should be talking about how are we going to do this together, right? Now, whether you're going to totally divulge how much the together is from your perspective, but we need to start talking about what are we putting into our vacation account, our 401k, investments, are we purchasing stocks, our college fund. You know, one person can't fuel the college fund for the kids. This is like a conversation you should be having. Now, whether it's a budget or not, we're just simply asking what percentage of your salary. It's not a budget, but what percentage are you going to give me each month for these 10 things, right? And then just put it in the account and I'll figure it out. So I'm okay with that. Now, let me tell you, Terrence Johnson said, I agreed, Matt, it all needs to be done before marriage. But what happens after you're married? And it still hasn't been discussed.
Well, there is not going to be, same with what Mr. Belcher said, there's not going to be a romantic time for it. You have to just sit down and put it on the calendar, you know, and if you get pushback from it, you really have to push it. This is the calendar. And what you can do, if that's something that's more you're bringing to the table than the other, is write out your budget. Give it to them. And here's what I'm working with. Here's what I'm dealing with. And to invite them to be vulnerable in that space.
But let me ask you a question, Reggie. What if you still get pushback? I mean, you literally heard one of our guests say she was not sharing her finances with her fiance, now husband.
Yeah, but she did.
She did eventually, but she was uncomfortable. But the thing is, he didn't leave her.
It's okay. He didn't leave her. It's okay being uncomfortable, and that's what you have to really understand in relationships. That you're not going to like each other all the time. You're not going to have lovey, warm, fuzzy moments all the time. But you got to handle issues in business to be successful in it.
Okay, listen,
Christine, I'm gonna tell you, I've been married for 25 years and in a relationship with Crystal for 30. I have a budget. She will tell you I do not stick to the budget at all. Not even.
Good job, man. That's what I wanted to hear.
It is on. Listen, the budget's on paper. Y'all see where I'm at? If you see all the hotels I go to, my wife is pulling her hair out right now.
I know she is, Matt. And thank you for that honesty.
Be back from Atlanta tonight,
Matt. And I just perfect. That's where I was trying to get to. Is that even when you establish the budget and you account for every dollar, you're still going to have one person that's going to go rogue, right? And but you have to have that other person who's going to be able to manage that. So listen, we're going to go to question number 5. Matt, thank you for that honesty, because and that's the reason why relationships get all convoluted, because one person went rogue on the budget. And so Terrence says it boils down to being on one accord. It does, but Terrence, even when you're on one accord, you're going to have a Matt in the relationship who's going to go rogue on you. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a Matt, and I'm going to be 100%, I need an allowance. I don't mind giving all my money and we sit down and figure out what to do with the money, but just give me an allowance so I can go rogue with my allowance. Okay, question number 6. If your spouse or person you're living with lost their job, how would that impact your finances? So Reggie, we're going to go to you first. I'm going to let Matt marinate on that. Matt, I want to get the perspective of both ways. So Reggie, what's your perspective?
For me, it would impact me hugely because my wife is the primary breadwinner in the household. However, it's not going to change. It'll change finances in our relationship. It's not going to change how I look at her, because at that point in time, I have this thing, and I believe that when people stress, it's because they're looking at the issue. You don't stress when you start looking at solutions. At that point in time, you got to start looking at solutions. Hey, listen, how soon can we get back to work? Do we need to put our house on the market? Do we need to downsize? What can we pay off quickly so we don't have to take as much monthly money?
So Reggie, I got a question. Coming from the perspective that your wife being a breadwinner, do you then look at how you spend or not spend because of that? Do you kind of manage it yourself to make sure you're not overspending because you want to make sure that you guys are good? Like how do you manage that from your perspective? Because I'm going to tell you there's like when you, and the thing is, your wife being a primary breadwinner, and by the way, Reggie does work, everybody, just to let you know, it's just that his wife makes a lot more money than him. So the bottom line is you do have funds to spend because you do work, but do you do things differently, like making major purchases, stuff like that? Do you sit down and talk about it because she's the breadwinner, or before so?
We had a thing when we first got married that no major purchases without a conversation. If you go out shopping and you see something for, like, this is early on our marriage, you see something for $200. That was a significant amount of money for us when we first got married for one purchase. Say, hey, let's it'll be there tomorrow. Let's come home and have a conversation about it. And usually, in other words, let's take the impulse off of it. If you really need it or wanted it, you can go back tomorrow and get it. It's been very few times in our relationship where that was a no. No, we can't go get that. But
okay,
for me,
so you guys do check-ins.
I'm not a big spender.
Okay, so you guys do check-ins before major purchases.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, great. So Matt, what about you?
So what I do is I do another ABCs, allowances. Crystal is the budget person for our house. She not only has the budget, she controls the bank. So she moves money in and out of accounts, specifically because she knows that my budget strategy is if I swipe the card and it goes through, then there's money. So what she will do is she will move the budget around. So Crystal is the budget person in our house. That's just how our relationship works. And then I have a debit card, and that debit card is kind of my money to spend. And I just look at the amount that's left and make decisions. We also have, the third C would be continuous communication. So she will tell you that she has full visibility on the purchases I'm about to make. And she has the ability to say, please don't do that. So with cell phones in 2021, there's no reason for a person to make a major purchase without consulting their partner. Doesn't mean they're going to not purchase it, but at least they can say, I was fully aware that you bought whatever. And then it's reasonable, right? Like, after you've been in a relationship with somebody for 2 years, you know their habits. There's only a couple major purchases you can buy. Typically, that's a house, a car, and investments. And if you're known to make bad investments, then your wife has, or your husband has, control over anything above $1,000.
I like
Things
that.
Between 200 and 1,000 are consultation purchases, or maybe 100, whatever your numbers are. They'll have consultations. So don't go buy something for $250. At least give me the opportunity to comment.
You know what? So that lends into our next question, which is, how would you start the conversation with the person that you're with if they spent what way beyond what they made a month, right? So, and that's like a great conversation. And a lot of times that can end or break a relationship. So I know for me, again, I need to be put on an allowance. I really do. And I don't need access to all the money, because if I see something and I'm like $200 short, I'm going in. I'm going in to get it. I don't even know what to say. So, Matt, from your perspective, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it all boils down to communication. The budget is just a symptom of poor communication or poor understanding. If you have great communication, then you know I need to put Christine on allowance, right? That's just how our relationship works. She knows it, I know it. So if we're fighting over budget, that means we're fighting over some other things, and the budget is just a symptom of that. I firmly believe that some things are what you call projection. I'm projecting my anger with you over this budget, but it's not the budget. The budget is just a projection. And so, Christine, you and I talked about that. And, people in relationships over seemingly trivial things, but they're just projecting. That item was not the deal breaker for the relationship. There were deeper problems in the relationship. If you get a divorce over, a budget issue, which is different than a financial crisis. So a budget issue is, hey, Christine, you went over budget this month, or hey, Matt, you went over budget. That's different than the house got foreclosed. The lights went off.
But Matt, what if it foreclosed because of your overspending? But your constant overspending, not a one-off and a two-off, right. Like because you're consistently overspending. I mean, that's a deeper conversation, which is, it goes back to what we were talking about, which is our question number 8. How do you manage finances in your household? Is it a group or individual discussion?
All right, so let's talk about the 5 F's. If any of your 5 F's get to the point that they cause existential threats to the relationship, whether it's sexual, financial, faith-based, then you need a counselor. And that's when you bring in professional help. So if you get a foreclosure, you need a counselor. If you can't perform in other ways, sexually or otherwise, you need a counselor. You need to bring in professional help.
I like that, Matt. So you know what? That's going to take us right over to question number 9. And I'm going to tell you, this is one that makes me laugh. Do you think there's an issue if you have a hush account, a secret account from your spouse or long-term relationship? And I'm laughing, Matt, don't laugh. Crystal, he does not have a hush account. Matt, stop laughing. So in a lot of relationships, we know this to be true. People have separate accounts that their spouses or the person they're with doesn't know about. So Reggie, what's up with that?
If you have secret accounts that people don't know about, you have trust issues. And as Matt said earlier, your issue is not the account. Your issue is trust and vulnerability, and you need professional help.
Okay, but let me ask you a question. What if you have a spouse that's a gambler or just lives beyond their means and is constantly spending up the money, where you basically lost a house before, lights have been shut off, and you have an account where you stash money so that doesn't happen? Does that mean you need to go see a counselor? If you're already seeing a counselor for their gambling?
I mean, it's like being married to a drug addict.
Agreed.
You need professional help. And within doing that...
No, but what I'm saying is, Reggie, you're getting professional help for the addiction, but you still have to protect your family.
Right.
So, I mean, come on.
You take their name off of stuff until they are sober.
You take their name off stuff. Okay, but do you think that's going to then be a conflict in a relationship? Now you're taking their name off of property, bank accounts. What does that mean?
I don't understand the question.
Control issues, you already got problems.
But Reggie, here's I'm curious on where Christine is taking us. Why is it wrong for an adult to have an account that doesn't have another adult on it? Okay,
number one, Matt, I believe in having a private account. I'm okay with you on that.
We didn't say private account. We said hush
account.
Yes,
I said a hush account.
See, the language, Reggie, I would tell my wife, yeah, you need to have some accounts and I'll have some accounts. I mean, I don't care. It's only when you call it a hush account. I'm like, a hush account? You grown. You can have any
I'm sorry,
accounts
guys.
you want.
If we're going by titles and you're offended, hush, private, secret, nobody know about it account. Give it whatever title you want. The question is, what's an issue? Now, Anissa said there should be a joint priorities that are agreed upon. Both parties should agree to invest in those, like a household bills and wedding or buying a house. When those are funded, each party could retain or rest on the income, the rest of their income for individual wants or needs. Now, I believe in that. So my question was, what happens when you find out, the person you're with got a little hush account? What happens?
So, Christine, I go back.
I have no problem with it. But if you're stashing money and you're trying to hide from me, I'm at that point in time, I'm trying to figure out why.
Okay, but the thing is, you guys do know in relationships today, married couples, long-term relationships, doesn't make a difference. Somebody's hiding money. It happens all the time. Don't act like you don't see people on the news saying, "Oh, he had an account in the Caribbean." Yeah. Really?
Doesn't mean it's right.
But it happens.
Right. But guess what? Why is that a detriment to the relationship if you have an account? I'm going to take away the hush out of it. If you have an account as a grown person, you're contributing to the household. You have an account in your name. You have it with your mama, your sister, your cousin. Like, why should another grown person care?
Because sometimes in relationships, in Nicole, by the way, she says, I agree with Matt. Regular communication is the key. Matt and Reggie, you guys get so many kudos. It cracks me up. Reggie, you used to get all the kudos. You're sharing it with Matt tonight. Thanks, Nicole, for watching. Hi, honey. What I'm going to say to you guys is this. I don't believe that a person should have it. I believe there's some circumstances where you may need to have it. But I do understand it's a conversation, right, for you to have this separate account of why you have it. If a person is doing it in secret, it will cause conflict in the relationship. That's a guarantee.
Christine, is your 401k a hush account?
My 401k is not a hush account, but my Caribbean account may be. Yeah. And that's just real talk. Yeah. And I started it years ago. In preparation when I do get married, that there is money that I'm going to keep funneling to that account, because not that I'm planning for it to go bad, but if it does, I'm getting married late in life. I need to know that if I have to give you half of what I make, it won't be all that half. I need to know that I got something that I can still continue to live, right? Because in my situation, I may end up paying palimony. I don't know.
Yeah, and Christine, that's why I had issue with the hush account terminology. Yeah, because it speaks to intent. What is your intent for this money? So the language does matter. There are lots of ways to structure monies so that you don't have to, quote unquote, call it a hush account. You can always have money that is protected, judgment proof, set aside, whatever, that no one can take in the event that your relationship goes south. You don't have to show people where the money is at. You don't even have to tell them it exists. I would just tell them that, listen, we have a understanding of how we spend money together. And if you have an account or I have an account or two, it's no big deal. And as long as you tell people that, I can think of no man that would want to know what's in an account if you share it with him the right way. That I have a number of accounts, lots of them, all over the country. I mean, it's not like you're 19. Anyone over 50 has all kind of accounts.
And I agree with you, they do. So Michael Belcher says, it sounds like a hush account brings insecurity. I'm all in. Why are you holding back in case we don't work out? So I'm going to say this. I agree and I disagree. I'm going to keep my Caribbean account with just my name on it. And if a person if I get married, I'm not going to tell him unless he watches this episode. He will not know that I have that account. And that's just real talk. I'm going to keep the account. You know why, Matt? Because I've seen so many relationships just go really south real quick. And you never know why. And I just feel like I've really worked hard, like I bust my katukas to get to this point. So I'm going to continue to stash. Anissa said, many times these hidden accounts are used to stash money to fund their exit from the relationship. It can signal a major problem. I agree. So again, if you're with me, it's not that I don't believe in us, but trust me, I bust my butt. So I'm going to put my money in that Caribbean account, and I'm going to love you just the same. If we work out, then I'll put your name on it and we'll have a stash together. That's all I can tell you. Question number 10. What would you do if you found out your spouse or long-term partner had a huge debt that would wipe out your savings account? Like you just found out today, Matt. Crystal came to you and said, Matt, this is what's happening. What would you do?
Yeah. So the first thing we would do is handle the crisis, right? Depends on what the amount of debt is. And then next thing we're going is for counseling. Because if I don't know about it, we got big problems in this relationship if I'm just finding out about it. So that would be the two things. One is triage it, handle the emergency first, figure that out, and then go for counseling.
I like it.
You know, there are things that can be deal breakers to a relationship. Trust things. So if this happened and I'm unaware after 30 years, then we have some serious relationship issues that the relationship may or may not survive. Not about the money, because I mean, it's just not about the money. It's about the trust the underlying trust issues that would be broken in order for it to have that kind of a secret.
Okay.
But professional counseling is step one.
So Reggie, what do you think? If Naomi told you today, like this is something major and it's going to wipe out her savings account, what would you say to her right now?
But my first reaction is, how much is it? And then my second thing is, we can get through this. Probably going to have to do like Mike said, get some counseling, because it's not the money. It's that there's not an environment set in a household where honesty and vulnerability is welcome. So when people have that type of hidden situation in their household, then you got bigger issues than the problem that is just presented in front of you.
Okay, so you agree with Matt?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to say Nicole makes me laugh. She says, Christine, what about the prenups? So I'm going to say I had that conversation, not about myself, but a couple weeks ago with a really good friend of mine, and he wanted to ask his fiance to sign a prenup. And he says, I think she's going to call off the wedding if I bring this up, right? And I said to him, well, tell her she can have one as well. He says, well, she has nothing to lose because I make 3 times, 10 times what she makes. Like, so it's to my benefit. So his concern was this was his first marriage, but this was her third marriage.
Oh.
And he felt like there should be a level of commitment. So before we go any further, Michael, thanks again for watching. Why does trust come up for spouses' debt, but not in the hush account?
It does come up, and that's what Matt had talked about, the intent. You know, a lie isn't a lie until it's an intent to deceive.
Oh, wait a minute, Reggie. Are you telling me my hush account is a lie? Is that what you're saying? Matt and Reggie, get over it.
If it is an
you've got to be kidding me.
If you're doing it to be deceptive, absolutely the case.
I'm sorry. It's time to go to commercial. We'll be right back. We can talk about my lies and what I'm doing with my Caribbean account, because Reggie and Matt has deemed me a liar at this point. I don't even know what to say about you guys. We'll be right back. We just need to hear from our sponsors. And again, thank you for watching the 5 F's to Love.
Día que me falte tu piel, ¿qué será? ¿Qué será?
I welcome you to My Shy Life. I'm Shia Perkins, brand creator, author and lifestyle coach. My mission is to share solutions on how to successfully exist across all relationships, romantic, social, platonic, and professional. I offer lifestyle and dating coaching services, provide personal development skills that will inspire and empower. Pick up a copy of my book, How to Date a Dime, a dating guide for men who want to date their own perfect 10. You will find that my book brings a fresh approach to the art of relationship building, armed with intuitive wit, proven lifestyle tools, and the ability to guide individuals into a reality of what it takes to find a perfect mate confidently and effectively. Visit my website, myshalife.com, and order your copy today.
Okay, guys, welcome back, and thank you for watching the 5 F's to Love. We led off that Christine was a liar because she had a Caribbean account. And it's not that Christine said she wouldn't share it with her potential spouse, but she felt like she needed that separate account. And then Nicole said, well, Christine, why not get the prenup? I agree with you, Nicole, but sometimes that's a hard conversation to have with people about the prenup. But my co-host and my guest today said that I was a liar, and I was really causing a lot of, I was basically planning my exit before I got together because I have a hush or secret account. So I don't know what to think about that, but we're going to go to question number 11.
Hey, listen, Christine, before you go to that last question,
Yes.
you know, in Bride Ready, what we teach people to be is to be powerful. And you're such a powerful woman that you don't need no hush account to be powerful. You have prenups, you have other tools to make you judgment proof. So you don't need a hush account to achieve protection for yourself and your assets. That's all we're saying. So I'm never calling you a liar. I just think that there's some information I can get to you that will make sure that you're protected and the hard work that you've done protects your assets.
You know what, Matt? I appreciate you, but my co-host went straight at, like, Christine, you're a liar, and called you destruction in the relationship. You know, Reggie, I expect more out of you. Do you understand me? When it comes to us, we're like a team. You just went right at me and just cut my throat off. But anyways, we won't worry about that. Reggie, that's what makes you Reggie, and that's why I love having you as a co-host. So question number 11 is, how often do you think couples should sit down and discuss finances? And that's just a real conversation. Should it be once a month, twice a month? I mean, we get paid every 2 weeks, right? Most people. Some people get paid once a month. I'm an entrepreneur. I get paid once a month. So how often do you think people should have this conversation?
I think once a year, or anytime there's a major situation that comes up.
Okay.
Major change in your income.
Is it
lost a job, new job, etc.
Okay. So Reggie, what's your thoughts? How many times should you sit down with your spouse or the person you're with, or to have that your partner?
The finance talk, I believe, should happen probably at the end of the year, going into the new year. But
budgetary. What did you say, Reggie? What?
The finance talk should probably happen at the end of the year, going into the beginning of the new year, and the budgetary talks happen probably once a month.
I like that. So the liar over here who's hiding money in the Caribbeans agrees with that. Of course, I won't be discussing my Caribbean account, but I will be discussing all other finances. So let me ask you guys a question, and it's not one of our questions that we have. The question is, so at 50, I've purchased a lot of stocks in a lot of different companies, right? I don't live off the dividends or anything like that. I keep the money in the accounts and I buy more stock. So Matt, what do you say to a woman like me who has invested in a lot of things, my 401k, IRAs, like a multitude of things? I have several finance people who manage my life. What do you say to me going into a relationship, or a person like me, whether it be male or female? How do we go into a new relationship? Now, mind you, big picture, whoever I'm going to end up with at this point has probably been married, They have children.
Mhm.
I have a child. How do I make sure I protect my finances without it being offensive?
Yeah. So, one of the things that happen when you're a certain age is you have to fence off all relationships. You do it when you're young, you just don't think about it because typically neither one of you has anything. So the fence goes up and it says, this is our stuff starting from this moment in our relationship. We either got married or we had a civil union or whatever the situation was, it became two legal entities. If you have assets and resources and stocks, you need professional help so that you can fence off what was yours before the relationship and separate that from what it was after the relationship. In all circumstances, it may not work. The person, especially if they're a certain spirit, might want to get access to your assets. That's when the conversation becomes difficult. That's when you have to decide what is their intent, what is their motive, and how do you protect yourself. And so that might be a deal breaker for the relationship. And when you talk about things that pay the cost to be the boss, those things come in boss relationships.
And so that's one of the major questions that I get from a lot of my female friends who are at a certain level and we're late in life going into marriages or long-term relationships, that does tend to be a deal breaker for the men that we're involved with. And everything else works amazingly, but then we get to that conversation where they want access to this. And I think for me, I'm going to get more insurance just for you, but the insurance I have right now is for my son. Do you get what I'm saying? Whatever I have now is for him. Now, when we get married, I'll get you a separate policy, but I'm not going to add your name to any current policies, right? So that's like a hard question to have. And the other thing is, earlier today, we were briefly talking about this, and a friend of mine married a guy, and he had overdue child support where he could not see his children until the child support was paid off, right? She paid the child support because she was in a financial situation to do it, but it shifted their relationship after she paid it. Now, it wasn't from her, it was from him. It was like he felt indebted to her in some way. So my question to you is, how do you handle when you're in a relationship with someone, you are making more money, whether it's male or female, and you kind of throw them a life jacket to kind of resolve a major issue in their life, but then it kind of stresses the relationship. Like, how do you bring it back to what you had, that loving, caring relationship before you decided to throw out the life jacket?
Well, if you go into anything thinking that the ramifications of it later on are going to change things, I wouldn't go into it, no matter how pure your heart is. Finances,
But Reggie, the thing is, that person didn't know it was going to be a negative impact. They just wanted to make sure that their husband could see his children. I'm very sure that she didn't pay it saying, oh my God, he's going to hate me afterwards. She thought he's probably going to love me more because I'm doing this for him.
There was one thing that I got from the movie Soul Food years ago, when Bird.
Reggie, did we just bring up the movie Soul Food?
Yeah, she said she tried to help her husband find a job, and her sister told her, let your man be a man. He needs to find his own job.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to take care of his own kids. And he needs to figure out how to walk that path to get to taking care of his own kids.
All right, so your feeling is the person should have never helped out. Matt, what about you?
There's a couple questions. Did he ask for her help?
I don't think he asked for her help, but he kept bringing up how much he missed his kids and, like, what do you think I should do? Should I do this? He didn't have the money, and that's why he was in the circumstances he was in, but she had the money, so she paid it.
But he didn't ask for her help. And so, one of the challenges for couples is to learn to be an active listener and not a problem solver. So I might be sharing with you my problems. It used to be that men were guilty of this. The woman complains, the wife complains about something, and the man acts, and he's like, I need to fix every problem you share with me. You know, part of being in a mature relationship is I can listen to your problems, but I have enough confidence in you as a person that you can solve your problems. And if you need my help, you will say, Reggie, can you help me? Christine, can you help me? But don't just assume and take away my power because I shared with you my situation, that you're some kind of a, captain.
I
don't think she took it that way, man. She was just trying to soothe her husband's pain. Now, Nicole said,
but he might have, Christine, did he take it that way? And based on a negative reaction, then he didn't appreciate what she did.
Matt, I think when he saw his children, I think he was excited and he loved her for it. But then afterwards, he felt indebted. So it shifted. It was like, oh, you had the money to do it, so you did it. Got it out. It kind of messed with his manhood, I think. And that's where I kind of felt like she did it out of a loving space because she really wanted him to see his kids. He had not seen his kids for a couple of years. You know what I mean? So she thought she was doing something loving, not ending the relationship.
Where do you draw the line between love and control, between love and mothering, between love and fathering? You're in a relationship. You're not their mama. You're not their daddy. You're their partner. And so I think it really, all couples struggle with this. But how do you stay in your partner role and let people be adults?
I love that, Matt.
One of the things
you have to, when they need help or ask for help. There's a lot of things. But if something goes sideways, it's very important to look at ways that you contributed to the situation going sideways.
Okay. Right. I like that, Matt. I like that response. Nicole, before we go any further, Nicole said if he offered, if he's offended, he wouldn't be for me. Just saying. And Nicole, I like your attitude because I didn't think that man should have been offended. I think he should have loved that woman. And that woman, I don't think she brought it up that she even paid for it. I think it was a situation of a phone call that was made, and it was from the ex-wife, and she said something like, when do you want to see your kids? And he says, oh, you're letting me see my kids. And she said, well, I finally got that last big check, so you can see your kids now. So it wasn't that she even told him that it was done. He then followed up with her and said, what did you do? Like, did you do that for me? So that was the question with that. So
hey Christine, let me ask you a different way. You go on your job, you're slaving away, you think you've earned a promotion. And then your boss goes, hey, Reggie called. He told me to give you the promotion. It's like, what?
Whoa.
And then Reggie goes, what do you mean you got your promotion? No, you're taking away my power to earn things for myself. If you're going to do it, at least tell me so I don't look like a damn fool when the ex-wife calls and says, thank you for paying it. And I'm like, Eureka, hallelujah.
That poor woman, she can't win for losing.
And then you're like,
oh my God,
it's your nosy ass wife who keeps paying for stuff that you didn't ask for.
Oh, Matt, I think you're covering up your mic. We can't hear you.
But one of the things you have to understand about men sometimes, I remember early on my marriage, we were driving somewhere. This is before GPS.
She said, oh,
I didn't have a clear, concise understanding where we were going. And my wife says, get directions. I says, I'm not lost. I just don't know where I'm going. What's the difference? I says, lost means I can't get back.
Oh my God. Reggie, I just want to say that parable sucks. Lost is lost. Not knowing where you're going is lost.
Men very rarely want to get directions when we feel like we can get ourselves through it.
Oh my gosh, that is so archaic. I'm not lost. I just don't know where I'm going. Not know where you're going means lost.
No,
okay, Nicole.
Lost means you can't get back
I don't even know what to say. Our last question for tonight, Reggie, your parables totally suck. I just don't know where I'm going. You don't have to even do that.
Type in and tell them you like my parables.
Don't support Reggie's parables, people. Nicole said, "Oh, not child support. It was about the prenup." She said, no, not about the child support, it's about the prenup. But you do understand when you marry late in life, in your 30s, your 40s, there's probably child support involved, so you need to be prepared. Our last question for night is the person who makes the most money responsible for helping the other person pay their bills? We talked about this earlier. And
Yes.
the question is back up again because a lot of times when you're dating, before you begin to merge households, or even after you're married and you're in a long-term relationship, the person who makes the most money is oftentimes looked at as the person who's responsible for keeping up both households. So why is that the standard or expectation, I should say? And by the way, anybody who gets with me, I can't pay your bills. I'm gonna keep it real right now. I would love to be with someone who can pay their own bills, but I can't, and don't ask. Okay, there you go, Matt. So I'm not paying bills, just not happening. Okay.
Yeah, I think that is a reasonable assumption that whoever makes the most money pays the bigger share of the bills,
Mhm.
especially if you, but you know, it's a conversation, right? You may decide that we're going to bank one check and, you know, but at a certain age, it's unlikely. So whoever makes the most money, it is reasonable to expect that that person pays a greater share, not 100%, but they pay a
Right.
greater share than the other person. That's just, to me, basic math.
Now, Matt, I like what you said the first time. And I do believe that's one of the things I said. You know, my parents lived off of one check and then took my mom's check and put it in the bank. So I do believe in that. I do believe eventually, whenever I get married, if we have two households, of which I have this house, I'm sure the guy that I'm going to be with, he's going to have a house. If we decide we want a bigger house or a house somewhere else, then my thing is my house is paid for. Everything I have is paid for. I can just put my money in the bank and we can just start saving for that new house or that new lifestyle. But the only thing I'm going to ask of him is, then I just need you to pay the car insurance and the utilities over here, or give me enough money so I can do that, right? Because that's all we have to pay on this end. Everything else is paid for. I have no mortgage. I have no car notes, right?
Is this an advertisement, Christine?
No, it's not an advertisement. But what I'm saying is, this happens a lot of times when you're in relationships. One person, their whole life is paid for, and then you get with somebody and they've got a mortgage that's $8,000, right? And you're like, but I want to get a house, you know, in the Caribbean, or I want to get a house down south, a retirement villa or something. So you need to think about that. Can you take one check and bank it? You know, how do you figure this out? So Michael Belcher said it's about equal sacrifice, not necessarily equal giving. I like that. That is so beautiful, right? I love that.
I was going to mention something to that effect. You know, in couples, people are typically better at something than the other one is. So what you're better at, or what you're more apt to be generous about, you have a greater, not say responsibility, but it's greater of you to give more of that. Like for instance, somebody who is good at cooking. You know, I'm pretty good at cooking. My wife doesn't cook, doesn't really like to cook. We're not splitting the meals 50-50. That's unrealistic, because
Right.
cooking is in my wheelhouse. That's what I do well. Why would I ask
Good
her?
job.
Why would I ask her to do that when it's not comfortable for her? And vice versa. She's great at she's. I'm like Matt. She's a whole lot better at the budget and the finances than I am. And she takes that.
And then you know what? And I think, folks, as we close out this session of Five F's to Love and talking about finances and asking the hard questions, even throughout this conversation, just with the three of us talking about it, we had some difficult moments, some obstacles, some differences. And I'm going to say to you, you know, just talking to Reggie, you know, my co-host, and with Matt, our guest, those things are going to happen. You just got to work through it and figure out how to make this work. And so I'm just going to say, if the three of us had differences of opinions and how to have a perspective conversation about finances, definitely when it's an emotional attachment, you're going to have it. You know, our thing is, we all agreed on one thing: don't stop trying to have those conversations. Just keep pushing through it. And you have to have a person in a relationship, like Matt said. Matt says, you know, my wife, there's a budget, but to me it's not a budget. I'm out. I'm doing my thing. And as long as that card works, to me it's money. It's when it don't work that I got to call and say I need some money. But until then, and I'm going to be Matt, I'm the same person. So the thing is, you just have to know who you're marrying, right? And so the thing is, in a relationship, they both agree their wives manage the money, but it doesn't mean that their wives control a household. It's still group decision making, right? And so that's the thing I want us to take away from this episode, is that we had to answer some questions about relationships and finances that even we disagreed on, the approach and how you handle it. And it turned out that Christine's a liar who has an account in the Caribbean, and that's okay, right? But the thing is, when I start a relationship, I'm probably the most easygoing person. I'm very laid back, and I really would like my husband to be able to manage the finances. I'm the kind of person, I just want to go to work and make the money. And then just give me an allowance. If you say we're doing this, we're buying stocks, we're buying property, we're doing this, let's talk about it. You make it happen, and I'll sign the paper. But I'm still going to keep my account in the Caribbean. That's separate from us. Don't worry about it. It doesn't mean I love you any less. I love you, but I'm going to keep that account. And to my girl, Nicole, I'm probably going to have to do that prenup. So thank God I have Matt. Matt's going to tell me how to have that conversation. So I want you guys to take away these things from this conversation. One, don't ever stop having the conversation from the beginning of the relationship and throughout the relationship. Continue to talk about finances. As life throws you obstacles, a loss of a job, a gambling addiction or addiction of any kind. Some people are shopaholics, right? That's still an addiction. Have that conversation. You may have one person relationship that lives beyond their means. You have one person that may be a budget breaker. Have the conversations. And the second thing is, go get help. If it gets beyond what it is that you're doing, go get help. Go get a professional. I think sometimes as minorities, we don't think that we should go get help, but we should. Seek additional help. And you guys can always reach out to Matt. Matt, you can find him on social media. Ladies, if you want to connect with him, and if you're a woman that's making 6 figures or more, and you want to be bride ready, he's the guy to go to. Obviously, I'm going to become one of his clients at some point, but Matt says I'm very stubborn, and I got some stuff I need to work on. I don't know if I'm bride ready. Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to be the bride ready. I know I'm ready to be a bride, but I don't know if I meet Matt's requirements to be a bride. But I want you guys to think about the third thing, is that to make sure that you're in a relationship with someone who respects you and understands you.
Yes.
Because there will be some things that's going to come out of this finance questions, that's the finance questions and conversations that may lead to you now understanding that your spouse doesn't respect you. And you want to make sure you're with someone that respects you no matter what. Regardless of how much money you make, may it be less or more, that person values and respects your opinion and your input. And the fourth thing I'm going to say to you is this. The way we get into these nasty conversations about finances is when you're dishonest, when you live beyond your means, and when you send your representative. Stop sending your representative to the table. Stop pretending to be something that you're not. Just be yourself and allow someone to be open to you about what they can and cannot do. You may find that it's a lot bigger or a lot smaller or a little different than what you had anticipated. So I'm going to say to you, thank you so much for joining us today on 5 F's to Love. And please join us next week, because we're going to be talking about how to tell your partner you want to do a little something extra in the bedroom, that the regular things you've been doing is not hitting the spot anymore. That's another hard conversation to have. So join me and Reggie and our guest next week. And I'm going to tell you, this show, if you can, use it as a reference tool. Share with your spouse, and maybe it'll help you have some of those hard questions. And again, when you meet someone, when you first started dating them, please don't introduce them with how much money you make. Just introduce yourself. Sometimes being you is more important than anything else. So thanks again for joining us on 5 F's to Love, and we'll see you next week, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Día que me falte tu piel, ¿qué será? ¿Qué será de mí? No seas parte de mi amanecer. ¿Qué será? ¿Qué será de mí? Y por todo yo brindo, desde lo feo hasta lo lindo. Tú eres una prueba que el mundo a mí nunca me brindó. Quería casarme, yo tan loco.